Okay. Greetings to everybody. Good evening. This is Soul Brother on my channel here. Pardon me for getting uh, starting off a few minutes late, but you learn as you go along. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Again, good evening. And I wanted to do this program right now to for a couple of reasons. Number one, I wanted to, in my own way, pay homage to Stephanie Mills, who's one of the great singers that we have in our community, as far as I'm concerned. And I think everybody else will bear witness to that and the role that she has played in not only singing in a soulful style, but also good in terms of representation. And she's uh, um, unapologetic in terms of her embracing black culture and all the rest of it. Well, first, we want to start off by saying that um, Stephanie Mills is somebody who has her roots, like most black entertainers from back in the day, have their roots in the black church. Stephanie Mills is was born, as a matter of fact, next week, a week from tomorrow, which would be March 22nd. She will be 66 years old. She was born March 22nd, 1957, in New York. She grew up in the Brooklyn neighborhood, Bed-Stuy, do or die, as they say. And while growing up there, she was raised in the Cornerstone Baptist Church in Brooklyn. Now, while Stephanie Mills is New York born and raised, she has roots in North Carolina. Her family, her parents, moved to New York from North Carolina back in the day, which of course makes them part of the Black Southern migration. We want to make some things clear here. That Stephanie Mills, as I said, got her start in the black church, and just kind of give everybody a little background on Cornerstone Baptist Church. The Cornerstone Baptist Church is one of the oldest churches in New York City, and it was established in 1917 with a few members. Their history goes back to World War One, so we're talking like 1917, somewhere thereabout. Now, led by the Holy Spirit, a small group went from home to home and held their first meeting at 933 DeKalb Avenue, Brooklyn, New York. So those of you who are from New York, specifically from Brooklyn, would know something about this. Um, this was in the home of Mrs. M. Freeman. I'm not sure what the M stands for, but anybody out there who knows some of that, please feel free to put that in the chat. Um, Back in those days, it was not uncommon for people to get together and form a church in their homes, and then eventually get a building, maybe a storefront church um, or an actual church to have their church services in. Well, this group continued to worship together, and on September 10th, 1917, the Cornerstone Baptist Church was organized and dedicated to the service of God. The Reverend William H. Rodman was the founder and pastor. Um, and on May 3rd, 1920, a meeting was held to organize this body into a permanent church. The six Baptist churches, which formed the Recognition Council, officially organized Cornerstone Baptist Church officially recognized it, um, Cornerstone Baptist Church, on June 9th, 1920, by holding a public service. The financial offering for this service was $5. Keep in mind again, this was in 1920, so just a little over 100 years ago. Now, give me 1 second here. Now, this is the thing we all need to be aware of. This is at a time of the first um, wave of black migrants from the South. Now, I'm not sure at what point um, Mr. and Mrs. Mills, Stephanie Mills' parents, moved to North Carolina. I don't know if it was a situation where they moved there together, or one parent came to New York at one point and another one came at another time, and they happened to meet up with each other in New York and happened to be North Carolinians. I'm not sure, but at any rate, they were part of that Southern migration. Again, I don't know if the parents moved there during the first wave or the second wave. The second wave would be more the um, post World War II. But this establishment of Cornerstone Baptist Church was during World War One. One of the reasons why this is significant in terms of the role of the black church, not just as it relates to Stephanie Mills, but by extension, other black artists from back in the day, is it's clear when you hear Stephanie Mills, you hear to borrow from um, uh, our great other W.E.B. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, and that is that the black church has played a significant role in the souls of black folk. When you hear Stephanie Mills sing, it's clear. And even though she recorded, I believe, a gospel CD back in the day. Um, she's a secular artist, but as a secular artist, you can hear the church influence without a question. The runs, the riffs, all of those things. For example, you know that she started out as a teenager. I believe she was 17 years old in the Broadway play The Wiz. When you hear her sing, "Ease on Down the Road" and other songs in there, and most notably "Home," and especially when she um, did a revised version of "Home" many years later. I believe might have been 1989, somewhere there about. You can clearly hear the church influence. That's clear. And so when people in today's environment want to overlook the role that the black church has played, not just as it relates to music, but as it relates to being a bridge over troubled waters, and want to be dismissive or not recognize the role that the black church has played, you're doing that, frankly, at your own peril. Because um, it's clear that if you listen to your present day artists, I mean, can anybody cite any artist today who sounds like a Stephanie Mills, who sounds like a Gladys Knight, who sounds like an Aretha Franklin? I want somebody to show me. Now, when I say that, that's not to overlook the Jill Scotts of the world, the Leela James of the world, and folks of that ilk. But generally speaking, you don't get that now. And I make the argument one of the reasons why you don't get that now is because, unfortunately, a lot of your present day artists or new artists are unchurched. And that is indicative of what you find in other areas. What do I mean by that? For the most part, people there was a sense of reverence when it came to the black church. There was a and we have to even go back even further, going back to slavery. On the plantation, you had people, our people who were enslaved on the plantation. They would sing songs like "Steal Away," which is what they call a um, spiritual. Those spirituals that they sang on the plantation, you could hear the soul of black folk. Well, of course, after slavery, you had what was called gospel music. And gospel music, um, people like Mr. Thomas Dorsey and folks of that ilk developed gospel music. Now, of course, gospel means the good news. And if people are honest, when you hear the music of the Negro spirituals as well as the gospel music from post slavery, um, whether you're talking about the Soulsters, Five Blind Boys of Alabama, Five Blind Boys of Mississippi, the Caravans, etc. If people would really be honest, they would have to cite that the music stirred their soul. Unfortunately, in today's environment, you don't get that. And so when you hear somebody like Stephanie Mills, and if you watch her when she performed at the Apollo, and by the way, as a young girl in the late 60s, I want to say maybe 1969 thereabout, late 60s to be sure. She won at the Apollo, I believe, 6 times. Now this is a child, not a grown woman yet. She's a child, and yet she's stirring the souls of people, her audience. And later on, when she gets discovered and is in the play, the Broadway play. I have to stress that the Broadway play, not just any play, but the Broadway play, The Wiz, which of course is a black version of The Wizard of Oz. When you hear, when you watch The Wiz, and you listen to the music and you listen to her style of singing, it takes you right back to the black church. So we have to give all kind of shout outs to Cornerstone Baptist Church being the reason why Stephanie Mills is who she is. And so it's similar when you think about it to what happened with people like Whitney Houston, who similarly grew up in the black church in New Jersey. Now, when you start talking about Whitney Houston, of course, she comes from a family of gifted people. Her cousins, Dion and Sissy, I'm sorry, they're Dion and Dee Dee Warwick. They're sisters, and they're related to um, Whitney Houston's mother, Miss Sissy Houston. And Miss Sissy Houston um, sang with a group called the Sweet Inspiration. Now, she sang prior to singing with the Sweet Inspirations. She sang with with a gospel group. I right now I cannot remember the name of the group. It'll come back to me, but I'm drawing a blank for some reason. But you can always look it up. But anyway, the point is that when you listen to uh, those black artists from yesteryear, the reason why the music stirred your soul, even if you were, let's say, a irreligious person, that music stirred your soul because that was the music of that was gospel music. And if people would be honest, again, I keep stressing honesty because unfortunately in today's environment we have not been dealing with honest brokers. And when you listen to the music of yesteryear, um, whether it's Mahalia Jackson and others, they almost had an ability to take you to the throne, if you will. Well, that's what you get when you hear from somebody like Stephanie Mills. Is she represents clearly a gift from God. And I don't know enough about her family background to say what I'm about to say, make a conclusive statement, but I will say that I suspect that that voice that Miss Stephanie Mills has, she inherited somewhere in her genetic, it comes somewhere in her genetic gene pool. In other words, she may have inherited it from either her mother or father's side of the family. And if you dug deep enough, she would probably find out that there was somebody in her background, family background, an ancestor, somebody who had a great voice. So clearly, somebody like Miss Stephanie Mills has been gifted with that. Now, when you listen to her sing the song Home, which in many ways, you know how when you watch the movie The Wizard of Oz and you listen to the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow by Judy Garland, that became a signature song. Well, the home song has become a signature song. And what has happened is when you listen to Stephanie Mills, first of all, if I understand when she sings it live, she she ends her show with that uh, song Home, and everybody's feeling this. Again, when you watch her on YouTube and you watch her performing the song Home at the Apollo Theater. I mean, she's literally at home because she's a native New Yorker. But when she's there and you hear her, you see how the audience is reacting to her. In many ways, that's the audience saying, "I feel you. I'm feeling this." That is similar to when Bessie Smith performed before her black audience and people reacted and responded because we're people who emote. And that way of emoting that you see has its African retentions in many ways. That's how we do. We don't sit around and just not move at all. There's no way that you're going to hear something, whether it's a song that's soft or whether it's something that has an upbeat, and you're not going to move. I mean, to do that, you would have to be, as my uncle liked to say, you must be dead from the neck up. But anyway, um, Stephanie Mills is somebody who, when she sings her secular songs, again, no matter how secular the song may be or songs may be, you can hear that gospel influence. I make the argument again that one of the reasons why we don't hear, we're not feeling this in our present day secular music is because many of these black artists are unchurched. Many of the upcoming black artists are unchurched from back in the day. And again, that's indicative of what's happening in the overall community and by extension, the overall society. And that is what has touched us. So if you notice, when people, they don't even have to know the language. When somebody like a Mahalia Jackson traveled all over the globe and sang, and sang to um, sold out arenas, many of those people didn't speak English, but they were moved by Mahalia Jackson. But they were moved by the Spirit. And that's the point I'm making when I talk about Stephanie Mills, since she's the topic here. When you hear Stephanie Mills and you hear her singing style, which would be a soul style, and let's be clear, let's not get it twisted. Soul music and soulful style is organic to the United States. And it comes from the souls, the depths of black folk. Why? Because as Jesse Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson pointed out in 1972 in Wattstax concert, he said our music determines determines the taste, determines the texture. That is why, if you notice, throughout the diaspora, that soulful style is unique and organic as it relates to the United States. That is not a style that you get from the Anglophone or Francophone Caribbean. That is not a style that you get out of Brazil. That is not a style that you get out of Mother Africa. That is a style that you get from the United States of America, and more specifically from the Deep South. And it makes sense because the Deep South is where slavery was. So when you hear people moan, when you hear people humming, when you hear people hitting certain notes and making notes bend and those type of things, again, that speaks to the souls of black folk, and that is distinctly unique as it relates to these United States of America. But getting back to Miss Stephanie Mills, Stephanie Mills is somebody who um, has clearly been in the game all her life. And for her to, and as far as I know, I don't believe there's any film footage or audio recording of when she performed at the Apollo in the late 60s. If anybody has some, that would be fantastic. 'Cause I, for one, would love to see or hear, at the very least, hear that. But that's the kind of uh, that's the and think about it. At the same time that she was performing at the Apollo, this is when Michael Jackson was performing with his brothers, known as the Jackson Five. And of course, later on, um, Michael Jackson and Stephanie Mills meet up with each other, become friends, have a relationship for a short period of time, et cetera, et cetera. All of those artists from that period. That's the one common thread. And the main thing is this: I mentioned that Miss Stephanie Mills grew up in the Cornerstone Baptist Church. If you go back and check it, most of your black artists from back in the day, their backgrounds, including the group Jodeci, the main denominations that they were raised in, with an exception of a few. I mentioned Jackson Five; they were raised Jehovah's Witness, as we all know. However, their mother um, grew up in the Baptist tradition. So what that means is that before the Jackson Five, the Jackson family, converted to um, Jehovah's Witness, they were in the Baptist church. And you couple that with the blues music that the Jacksons were exposed to by way of their father, Mr. Joe Jackson, as well as the gospel music that was played in the home of the Jacksons. Undoubtedly, Mahalia Jackson and a host of others. But my point is that most of your black artists from back in the day, their backgrounds, with an exception of a few, their backgrounds were Baptist and holiness. You had a couple here and there that might have been Methodist, might even been Catholic, but the vast majority of our black artists from back in the day, their backgrounds were Baptist and holiness. and it's reflected in their performances. It's also reflected in their style of singing. For example, Sam and Dave, who were known for Soul Man and uh, Hold On, I'm Coming, I Thank You, songs like that. If you ever watch footage of their performances from back in the day, they would do what would be termed as the holy dance. Well, the holy dance, of course, that comes out of the Holiness Church. Well, they brought that onto the stage, and it's similar to James Brown. James Brown came out of a similar background. Same thing with Mr. Joe Tex. Um, that's the kind of background that they put on the stage within a worldly context, if you will. Gladys Knight, Baptist background. Um, and just again, the list is long, but that unfortunately in today's environment we don't get from our present day artists, and that's one of the reasons why. It's one of the reasons. There are several other reasons that would take too long to get into right now, but that's one of the reasons why the music doesn't stir the soul. I mentioned earlier about the group Sam Cooke and the Soul Stirs. Uh, the title is self-explanatory. Stirs the soul. Soul stirred. If people would be honest, they would have to admit that the music of today doesn't move them the way the music of yesteryear does. I mean, all one has to do is just go to YouTube and find. I've been on YouTube several times, and I've seen where people post comments, and they'll see things like, "I wish I had been born during this time period. Today's music sucks." And these are people who obviously were not born when some of this old school music came out. Now, one could say, well, every generation criticizes the generations, the music of the generation that come after them. That part is true. However, whenever you have young people who are making comments like today's music sucks, I wish I had been born during this period, and they're going in on today's music and saying that nothing compares to the music of yesterday, that's when you know this is real. That's when you know this is real. So while I would agree that in today's environment, well, not just in today's environment, every generation, the older generation is critical of the. For example, if you have somebody, let's say, who their time period was during the big band period, and say they're critical of the music of doo wop, which would be in the 1950s. Well, of course, you're an older person, you're not going to be feeling doo wop like that. I get it. But the thing is this, again, all one has to do is look at and listen to the comments from younger people who are pumping up the music of yesteryear and stating that no, today's music doesn't come close. That's when you know this is real. So I'm going to be wrapping things up pretty soon, but I just wanted to, I thought this was an important um, area to go into. Now, this is my second podcast. I tried one before in January, but unfortunately, I was running into some technical difficulties, and I was doing one or attempting to do one on Dr. King and um, John Huggins and Bunchy Carter tribute. At some point, probably in April, I'll be paying homage to Dr. King. That's going to be one, and I'm hoping to get some um, people to talk in on that. But I want to get back to this point here. It's very, very important to see and understand that somebody like Miss Stephanie Mills, who's still in the game, who's almost 66 years old, and still um, hanging tough. And the for those young people who have not seen either the Wiz, the Broadway play, or have not seen the movie The Wiz. Now, even though um, Diana Ross played the role of Dorothy as opposed to um, Stephanie Mills, um, and of course the movie is based on the Broadway play. So adaptation. The fact of the matter is, when you listen to the music in The Wiz, whether you're talking about the music in The Wiz, the Broadway play, or the movie, the music captured the time. And this is in the 1970s. You still had residues of the 1960s in many ways. And many of us were embracing um, things that were organic as it related to our culture in these United States. And I feel very fortunate to have been around during that period. I feel very fortunate, even though I myself never got a chance to see the play with Miss Stephanie Mills. I wish I had, but I did get a chance to see the the movie when it came out, and that was an experience I'll never forget. In fact, um, I went there and saw the movie twice. You know, and so, but my point is, when it comes to somebody like Stephanie Mills, I remember her very well. I remember her back in the '70s. I remember her back in the '80s, of course, and when she did her rendition, or a revised version, I should say, of the song "Home." In many ways, one could argue that the song, well, first of all, it clearly had a church element in it. That's without question. There's a church element. The other thing is that when you hear "home," it could be applied to several things. It could be um, a joyous occasion. It could be, say, somebody's funeral. I've never been to a funeral where that's been played, but I can see a person possibly doing that because of the lyrical content. But also, and I want my audience to think about this. We're now at a point where people are beginning to embrace, and celebrate Afro Americana culture that has its roots in the South. Well, say, well, what does that have to do with the song Home? My thing is this: one could argue very easily that the song Home could be a theme song for the South, whether you're talking about Texas, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, etc., any part of the South, because you have people who, some people have returned to the South, some people have um, relocated, and or even if they haven't relocated, have made trips there and begin to understand and fully appreciate the role that Southern culture has had, because the base of Black culture in America is Southern culture, period. Whether you're talking about the food, like soul food, that's Southern culture, Black Southern culture. Whether you're talking about even the way we talk, I mean, of course, somebody can make a distinction between a Southerner and, say, a non-Southerner, but even those of us who might be urban, certain ways we pronounce our words, or even certain terminologies that we use, has its roots in Black Southern culture. The point is, there's no getting around that. And so I don't know this, and I don't want to be presumptuous, but one could even argue that the song "Home" settles very well with Miss Stephanie Mills, because even though she's a New Yorker born and raised, it's my understanding that she now lives in Charlotte. I believe it's Charlotte, but she lives somewhere in North Carolina. She's been living there for years, the home state of her mother and father. So, um, and when she recorded "Home" back in the '80s, I believe it was late 1980s when that song came out. Somebody help me, but I think it was. Um, Everybody remembers her with that version, and all the ad libs and all that stuff she added to it. And make no mistake, those ad libs, I'm telling you, those ad libs come from the Black church. The way the Black audience reacts and responds to her when she's performing, doing a live version of "Home," is the same way, same thing that you would get from the Black church. Well, again, as I stated, she was birthed in the Black church. She come out the Black church experience. And so, in many ways, you and the Black church are inseparable. And once you lose or break away from the Black church, one could argue that you've broken away from a part of your identity, if that makes sense. I want people to really, really understand that. And my thing is this: if you've chosen to part company with the church for whatever reason, okay, that's your prerogative. But no one understand this. Um, Always remember, as the saying goes, from whence I came, and that the Black church represented even during slavery. And we might get into this one day soon about the further. I'm talking about the music there, but the role of the Black church in our community and culture. But it has served as a bridge over troubled water. And I believe that somebody like Miss Stephanie Mills knows and recognizes this. And if you ever watch the interview that she did with Mr. Sean Perez on Vet Vlad TV, what did she say when he asked her about her having background in the church? She said absolutely. And not only did she say absolutely, she said it like, oh, yes, of course. The black church um, is what I come out of. So she has not turned her back on the black church. She understands that. And she also said in her interview, she said that she doesn't fear anybody but God. So in closing, it's clear that Miss Stephanie Mills recognizes not only the role that the black church played, but also it's clear that the role that her parents played, her mother in particular, in terms of the values and those things, and clearly at in her mid 60s, um, those values, those traditions, um, we see with her, and that's a positive, and that goes back to the old saying about you'll never walk alone. I want to thank everybody for giving me this chance, opportunity. I look forward to hearing, or rather seeing, remarks in the chat. Let me know what you think, whether you like, dislike, what I can do to make some improvements. I'm always open for constructive criticism, not a problem. And hopefully, the next time, what I'll do is the next time I'm on, which might be next week. I haven't made a final decision what my topic will be, so I'll try to post that when I can, but I won't say anything about it right now, but I will post that. But thank you very much. This is only 30 minutes or so show today, but next week I will say this. I plan to have it maybe in 45 minutes to an hour. That's my goal. But again, thank you